Murphy here, your Chief Business Officer, and I'm here today with Steve Worobec, our guest. You might have noticed today that it's different from Enio, Mr. Phil Crypto. But yeah, we're doing it today for our first official PHILCast from Dubai. So we're here today with Steve Worobec, who I'll introduce you to, is a friend of mine, ex-colleague at Careem, marketing wizard, outspoken tweeter, entrepreneur. But Steve, how do you see yourself? Who are you? Who is Steve Worobec?
How do I better that? Outspoken tweeter. I'll definitely put that on the CV.
Oh, you definitely are.
Yeah. No, I think I'd summarise myself as a marketeer. I've been in Dubai probably about eight, 9 years now. Super into tech side of things, and then really discovered, I guess, Philcoin, which we'll get into, in the crypto industry back in 2016, 17. And that's really kind of what I would say sums me up as Steve. Into CrossFit, love coffee. So if you're looking for me, that's where you find me. Probably in the gym.
Having a shot of coffee after CrossFit.
Yeah, exactly.
Lovely. Well, hopefully this year you might get me into the gym. We'll see.
Let's go.
Every year it's new year, new me. But
just never start in January. Everyone starts in January and then everyone quits. Start in February.
Yeah, I was planning to start in February 2024 anyway.
We should know in the crypto scene you never follow the herd, right?
Very, very true.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
But Steve, tell us, we met, we're friends now and we both moved on from where we originally met, but we met at Careem, and just to touch on that, you spent a large part of your career in tech, where I said we spent at Careem, ex-Uber company. But tell me about your views now on tech since you've moved away from that. Where do you see big tech going? What are your views on the tech industry? What's happening in tech at the moment?
Yeah, so, I guess my career, it obviously spans back. I started off in media and advertising back in London, and then came over into the UAE. I was in a startup, and then that's when I joined Careem, so that's when we met.
Yeah.
But tech in itself is, it's always evolving, so it's a constant evolution.
Yeah.
So the tech scene is just going to keep on moving, keep moving forward. I think the one thing I would say that I've noticed over the years is obviously the speed. So the speed of development, the speed of adoption, the speed that things move in is something that's getting probably it's faster and faster and faster, which is changing the landscape for everyone involved.
Yeah.
So there's this constant upskilling that's required. How do you stay on top of on top of things in an era of like information abundance?
Yeah.
So the tech scene itself, everything just keeps on shifting and moving. At rapid.
Yeah, absolutely. And like this, it reminds me of this meme or meme. Apologies, I'm not one of the cool kids. I still don't know how to say it to this day. But I saw this meme the other day, and it was the adoption of Facebook. How long it took to get from 0 users to 1 million users, and for Facebook it was like 5 years. For Instagram, 3.5 years. And even up to now, I saw this new chat GPT thing.
Yeah.
How far to get from 0 users to 1 million users, and it was something like 5 days.
Yeah,
if that. And it just blew my mind, but it ties exactly into what you said about the abundance of technology, the abundance of information and content and the speed. I believe we just need more and more content. We are just consuming content at this incredible rate. But it brings us on to the next question I really wanted to get to ask you, because you're not in tech per se anymore, but Web3 and how that's revolutionizing the tech scene, how it's revolutionizing the world. Where do you see Web3 bringing us?
Yeah, so Web3 in itself, being a marketeer, I understand buzzwords. So Web3, I think the framing of Web3 helps the general population to a large extent understand kind of a shift or a change in technology trends.
Yeah.
So Web3 as a bucket is really kind of where that's kind of, I guess, been born from. I think it's probably born out of a VC or an investor.
Oh, I'd say
landscape.
so. Yeah.
I think I know the ones as to where that came from, and that that naturally has helped kind of I guess tie a bit of the industry together.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't necessarily say it's a good kind of framing for the industry to kind of adopt fully.
Okay.
So on the
what about for the laymen? What about for the people who are just getting in? It's a very easy way, as you said.
Easy test to that is does the regular retail person call Facebook Web2?
Very well said.
So, you know, when you think, I'd say, and then you go into the whole crypto industry in itself, then one of the main challenges that we have is that kind of UX aspect.
Yeah.
You know, UI UX. So if we're going to get mass adoption on new technology, then it has to be completely seamless.
Yeah.
In Web 2, you know, the UI aspect, the interfaces, everyone's become super familiar with.
Yeah.
And they're very easy to use, and people know them, right? So it's very familiar. To move that too far away from that may cause friction points for adoption. So, you know, just going on to the kind of Web 2, Web 3 thing, I think it's an easy bucket for people in the inside of an industry to talk about. But all in all, I think it's kind of a bit of a generic marketing buzz phrase. Okay. And as you know from my profile,
yes,
I live more in, you know, if we talk about Bitcoin specifically, and then there's everything else. Yeah. So I wouldn't associate as a Bitcoin like maxi in terms of Bitcoin only. Yeah. I understand the philosophy and the kind of talking points behind that. I do also appreciate other technology that comes out as well. Okay. That's not to say that I advocate that technology. Yeah. And that's really where a lot of the Web3 kind of crypto murky water sits today. Yeah. You know, so I think your question was, how's it going to revolutionize?
Yes, yeah. Like how is it? I mean, how is it going to revolutionize what has become norm for us today? Like how we use the internet, how we use IoT, all of these different web-based applications, or you know what I mean, just the web. How is Web3, and I know, apologize for using that word in front of you. But how is that going to revolutionize where we are?
Yeah. So I mean, I think if we look at some of the main pain points of where things are at, like what is the problem statement that, say, the crypto industry, Bitcoin is trying to solve for? And you can break that down into multiple areas. Yeah. One of the core components or issues that we have today is trust. So in the latest era of kind of, how we've grown up with technology and the internet, like, you know, I remember being a kid, right? Yeah. No such thing as a phone. No. Go outside, kick a ball around.
Nokia 3210.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely. So like today, you know, the internet has kind of, and this is, if I go back to technology and the speed that everything is kind of being adopted and thrown at society, that has led to arguably probably shortcuts being taken and breakdown in the fabric of trust within society.
Absolutely.
So, and that breakdown of trust inherently has come from data and where that data has then been used and how that's then, you know, the hands that that's gone into, and then the centralization aspect that comes from owning all of that data.
Bedrooms having his ear in our living rooms through Alexa, Facebook,
Google, Amazon. Crazy. You know, you go through all of this, right? So we, you know, in the past era of the internet, which we're still in the Web 2 era. Yeah. Web 3 is just a test. Like we're still in the MVP stage.
Shallow waters.
Exactly. Yeah. As we've seen with the way the market responds to it.
Yes.
So, you know, what we're seeing now, coming out of this kind of probably peak centralization aspect, and then I don't know if we're at peak breakdown of trust yet. I think that's probably to come.
I think the end of 2022 was pretty close to that.
It's pretty close, but not quite all the way.
I agree. Yeah.
So what does that then mean, or what does that look for when we talk about what the Web3 or the future of the internet might look like? It's re-ownership of your data. Right?
Absolutely.
So trying to re-own my data and what that actually means, which would then inherently start to bring about much more trust within kind of the way that we integrate, or the way that we're using and interacting with these products. Yeah. And I think that's one of the big problem statements that kind of sits within the industry itself. So, you know, how do we fix the kind of tech layer to solve for trust? Yeah. Then, if we go into the bit that I'm much more passionate about, which is like philosophically really what brought me into the industry, which is, you know, how do we fix a monetary system that is inherently designed as a feature to debase and take away from society.
Absolutely.
Right? So, and that's really where the world of Bitcoin comes in, and there's obviously the tribalist kind of debates that happen here when it comes to what money is. But if we look at Bitcoin as a kind of a specific piece, that's really where kind of my interest sits with. Yeah. Because inherently, if you go, and we speak about this, if you go back to Careem days. Yeah. You build a product and then you can patch over the top of that product, you can you know, fix everything that you need to over the top, but you've still got issues at the kind of core of the product itself.
100%.
You know,
bandage.
And to an extent within Web3, even though there's some exciting stuff going on, there's interesting projects, interesting technologies, amazing people in the space that are working towards these different solutions. Yeah. at the same time, in some ways, we're still building, some of those projects are still being built on quite shaky ground.
Yeah.
And that's where, today I sit and, with quite a long-term time horizon, it's like, if you can solve at the ground, at the base level, and what are we trying to solve for when it comes to things like decentralization, fix that and solve that, and then we can start to build and layer on top of that.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about the space today, that I find interesting, which I've seen everyone just debates online, is over here in the Bitcoin world, we're trying to solve that base layer, decentralization, and that's paramount, fundamental. And then over here in the Web3 crazy, whatever the world is, you can describe it.
The GM road clouds.
Exactly, yeah. Over there, what you have is you just have a ton of experiments.
Yes.
And if you ask yourself, honestly, when you look at that from the outside, you would sit there and say, well, these experiments are great insight, because eventually, when the time comes, if everything is solved over here, and there is an opportunity to then move across, then that's what will take place.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm not sure that will be the case. I think there's going to be multiple. I don't believe it's a winner-take-all type thing. And I also think that you can really separate out what money is and what a technology stack kind of sits out over here. So I think that we might see those two worlds coexist, and maybe in a future state, decades from now, maybe it consolidates.
Yeah.
Because that's in effect, if you think about the way that a lot of technology or even empires rise and fall. Everything you go from this point of total centralization, total control. Everything fragments. Small governments just communities decentralize out, and then over time things then reconsolidate. So we're at the point where I think we're at that peak centralization. And then we'll start to fragment and break down, which is what we're starting to see this new web. So there will be this kind of fragmentation, and then over time that will then move similar to what we see with Amazon, Facebook, Google today. So it's very hard to predict years out, but I do think it's important that most people understand the core difference between what Bitcoin is and what Web3 crypto, however you guys want to phrase it.
Absolutely.
That is a totally separate piece.
I completely agree, and I know, just because I personally know you, what your views are on Bitcoin and then everything else over here.
I don't hate everything else.
No, I know you don't, because I know you make investments, and you're very.
I wouldn't call them investments. I speculate on the subject.
Speculation.
I invest and save over here with Bitcoin.
Actually, on that topic, just very quickly, because I don't want to move off some of the points you've made.
Sure.
But just while you've said that, is there? I hate this question. What's your top 3? What's your top 5?
Sure.
But if I have to ask, what are your top 3 or top 5 projects? Not that you have to be invested in or speculating on, but ones that have piqued your interest for maybe technological reasons, or maybe a cool team, a legitimate team that people on. But what are projects you're looking on at the moment? And of course, obviously, apart from Philcoin.
Of course. Naturally, specifically, Bitcoin is, I live in the kind of Bitcoin space. So if I was to speak about projects specifically, and I'll tell you what, I'll break them up. So, on kind of in the Bitcoin world, obviously we've got Lightning Labs.
Amazing.
Which is, it's amazing. There's a lot of stuff happening on there, and I think if we look at the growth of that, it's still very early days, but I think there's a lot of promise there in terms of what that will then mean.
But 2022 saw it quadruple from 2021. I mean, incredible.
So that sort of growth, anyone who's worked in tech will understand that type of growth, if sustained over years, is going to compound significantly. So, I think there's huge opportunity there, and I think there's, from a developer point of view, there's a lot of good minds working on it, but there's also
Jack Dorsey, Twitter.
Jack Dorsey, of course. So within the Lightning world, you've kind of got this very interesting space that's developing. And spinning off from there, you've got things like Nostra and Damas. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I've heard, I wouldn't be an expert on them, but I've heard people, maybe you talking about them before.
I'm not an expert on it, and I also haven't got into the trial aspect of it. But that's decentralized social media. And again, if we go back to one of the core issues, we speak about trust. So that that breakdown of trust, decentralizing social media, so it can't be censored, etc. So it's a super interesting piece that's happening now on Bitcoin. Whether that succeeds or not is far too early to tell. And then I've seen other things in the kind of the Bitcoin landscape. I'm trying to think of the name. If it's Vida, I think it's Vida. Yeah, it is Vida. It's the same as the hotel chain down there. But what's interesting about that is if we speak about things like spam communication, the worst things about this place. How many times does your phone ring a day?
Too many.
Right? Whether it's property agents, financial advisors.
One time a day is too many for me.
Exactly, but it's constant. But Vida is utilizing like Lightning aspect, the Lightning network. And again, it's like you as a person set your rate. So if you want to reach out to me, DM me, or you want to call me, there's a small fee that you would pay.
Really?
So if you imagine telecommunication going back to today, if you want my time,
pay me for it.
Pay me for my time.
So you set your value. You set your value.
And we're talking about sets, right? So we're talking about fractions. But that whole aspect of reaching out, I mean, if we think about what that may start to support in the future, in a totally decentralized world, we might have like a massive increase in spam to start with, so how do you reduce that? So that could be quite interesting.
Absolutely. Then it takes away the whole advertising, whitelist calls,
Exactly, so all of that, like if you want my attention, you want my time,
it for,
you got to pay for that. So, in Bitcoin's world, there's so many different things happening there, and obviously I think there's Web 5, which is, exactly. Homage to HTML5, I think that's what homage to. Or it could just be 2 plus 3. But there's some cool stuff going on there when it comes to identity and the decentralized web. So still very early days, so there are things I'm keeping an eye on. And then outside of Bitcoin ecosystem, I mean, it's hard being in the space and not to pay attention and just understand what's moving.
Yes.
So obviously you look at your layer 1 aspect, so you look at Ethereum.
Of course.
You see that you just have to pay attention to it. And obviously then moving to the proof of stake aspect is great as a Bitcoiner because it really creates that separation. I mean, we can't go on to the ESG conversation. I've got
You got very big views on this?
Point of view on that whole crap. But Ethereum in the layer 1 space I think is interesting. And then I think if you have to really look at like where their challenges are, so whether it's scalability aspects. So you can look across the other layer 1 stuff.
Ethereum pushed through a really big barrier at the end of Q3 last year when they forked off and everyone thought they were going to have these major issues.
That was their proof of stake shift.
Exactly, the proof of stake shift. But I think,
which in fairness to the community went very well.
Way better than I imagined. There was minimal disruption.
So when you think about it, if you look at it from just as a outsider from a tech perspective, you see that type of shift and that type of product update, you appreciate the kind of smoothness that went with that.
Absolutely.
So there's if you look across the whole layer 1 ecosystem, I mean there's a lot of noise there. Obviously we've seen with Solana. Solana had an amazing ecosystem, but then we saw kind of their connections, a bit with FTX and SAM. So what that did, but that's not to say that ecosystem dies because there's
of course not. But as it was hailed to be, was the ETH killer and the Ethereum killer. And
exactly. But everything is either a Bitcoin killer or an Ethereum killer.
Exactly.
Right. But I look at all of the layer 1 aspect and I pay attention to what's happening there and try to understand the technical differences, even though I'm not fully adept on all of the tech side. I think stablecoins are interesting. I think no matter what, if you're in this space, you've got to pay attention to the stablecoin aspect. And I think stablecoins today, whether they're running on the Ethereum blockchain, they will be on the Bitcoin blockchain too. So their role, if we think about the transition and usage of retail, just institutions into this space, and I think that's going to be one of those kind of bridges. If we think about what bridge could be to more adoption, it's things like stablecoins and how useful they are for countries like Venezuela, Argentina, Lebanon, Egypt, is where my family is. I mean, if these guys had access to this stuff, they wouldn't be debased at the speed of what they were being debased at. Right?
Incredibly so. And I saw a read today actually, the National Bank of Australia, NAB, which was a bank I used when I was over there 12 years ago, they have just come out with their stablecoin that they're launching on Algorand and Ethereum. They've just announced that today, which is amazing. So we've now got, but then it does have to bring us to a place where, and I know you're a big advocate of maybe one side of this coin, is towards the latter part of last year, 2022, we had certain things that happened in the industry like Mr. Sam, FTX, etc. And that was a catalyst really for the discussion around centralization and regulations around a decentralized, idealist, some would say unrealistic world that we want to be going towards. So what do you think of that? What do you think about the people that are saying, no, we need regulations, we need centralization, especially around stablecoins?
Yeah, so, I mean, so many parts to that question.
Yes.
So, regulation in general
Yeah.
shouldn't necessarily be overly feared,
Yeah.
right? But there is a timing for regulation. Anyone in the industry who's screaming for regulation now is at risk of crushing to an extent some innovation that can take place, right?
I 100% agree.
Because the regulators don't understand this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there are easy wins
Yeah.
when it comes to regulation, or the way that I see it. I'm not a regulatory expert. I have no idea on this topic, other than kind of what I've observed. But
Yeah.
if I really think about it, there is easy wins when it comes to centralized players.
Yeah.
Sam and FTX
Yeah.
was a centralized player.
He was, absolutely.
Because of a lack of clarity over in the US, he moved offshore, which then allowed him the
Freedom to do what he
ability
wanted,
to freedom to do
yeah.
what he wanted. So, those issues, when you don't necessarily give some guidance or clarity,
Yeah.
whatever you want to frame it, then that's what you lead to.
Yeah.
Coinbase Brian Armstrong kind
Yeah.
of came out of this smelling of roses.
Yeah, he
and
did.
he's one of the most compliant, but he's the one being hauled in front of Congress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, that deters you
Yeah.
to then actually work with these people.
Yeah.
So I think, as an industry as a whole, I wouldn't necessarily say the industry is in a good spot to say, yeah, give us regulation. Because the people that are going to be commanding those regulations don't have a full grasp of this yet.
I don't have a full Gary and the boys from the SEC and stuff, they don't have absolutely.
No,
I don't want to get too political here, but they have no clue, I would say.
No, and I think there's a few, how to say it without, misaligned incentives, which is part of the core problem of us. Politics,
Yeah.
like financials,
Absolutely.
whatever your connections are, however you get into those positions of power. So, and this is where decentralization really kind of comes in,
Yeah.
right? So if you're controlling the money and you have, control of this aspect, the amount of money in the system,
Yeah.
then anyone closest to that can benefit
Yeah.
from that. Again, you go to Bitcoin, there's no issuer, it's decentralized.
That's what
this is the point, right?
That's why that's the
So we
perfect
see this
course
everywhere.
there. Yeah.
I think you also mentioned my kind of regulation about centralized and decentralized.
Yes.
So, and I don't know a huge amount about this, but if you looked over that period of time, obviously from the Luna disaster, fiasco,
Huge.
3AC, BlockFi, Celsius,
Yeah.
FTX, these are all most of them centralized players, right?
They were,
Particularly
yeah.
BlockFi, Celsius,
Yeah.
3AC,
Yeah.
FTX.
Yeah.
The DeFi protocols within the space just carried on as normal.
Yeah.
Business as normal.
Yeah.
And I think there were a few attempts to try to test those protocols. But what's interesting when you really look at it is everyone's attention today is now on the centralized players.
Yeah.
So the regulators are actually looking at it, going, okay, well, these centralized players are what we should regulate.
Yeah.
I mean, they should already be regulated because it's not too hard to regulate centralized players when you're operating in a financial system. So it's already there.
Exactly.
It's just that they moved offshore.
Yeah.
So, I think the regulation that's at a front end of a centralized piece, I think is going to be one of the first areas to go to. And that's probably where you see the Stablecoin Act, that type of regulatory stuff come out sometime in 2023. That'd probably be reasonably healthy or a starting point for the industry.
Yes.
After that, how do you regulate DeFi? I mean, I see it obviously, I'm trying to think of his name, Ryan Ambasari. If you follow him on Twitter, he speaks a lot about this when it comes to how do you regulate this space.
Yeah.
Him, Brian Armstrong, quite outspoken, kind of discussing the topic. But how do you regulate DeFi from that? I think that's going to take a lot more time and needs a lot more thought.
Yeah.
There's the whole regulation around ESG.
Yeah.
Everyone loves focusing on the environmental stuff.
Yeah.
Lest they forget the other two pillars to ESG. And governance is one of the key aspects that blockchain tries to solve for.
Yeah.
Trying to remove this poor governance that actually currently infiltrates the system.
Yeah.
So I think the whole ESG narrative is something that will keep conversation going over the next few months, maybe towards the next kind of 18 months into next year. And I think that will be a topic that Bitcoiners will be quite vocal on because environment, proof of work, even though the industry and the mining industry is shifting more towards renewable energy. I mean, renewable energy to an extent, but also if you think about how you balance grids, I won't go into the technicals of it, but there's a ton of upside as to the benefits of what mining can bring and how it can utilize wasted energy, stored energy, renewable energy. I mean, even the methane
Yeah.
flaring, right? So, gas flaring.
Yeah.
Capturing that and then turning that into energy.
Yeah.
And there's also the aspect that it's agnostic of location.
Yeah,
so you don't have to go to an energy source. Right? Like that's the beautiful thing about it. So I think, in terms of regulations, I think the centralized players will get regulated heavily. And I think Stablecoin Act will be something that we hear a lot more about in 2023. And I think the whole ESG conversation will just continue simmering.
So you think it would be more of the centralized players, like your big CEXs and stuff like that, you think they'll be attacked first, not the stablecoins?
Yeah, not necessarily attacked. I think
it's just about purists and they'll say,
it's about trying to bring them, within the kind of the parameters and the rules of the system.
Yeah.
And,
I don't think we can afford, not for people like you and I, or a lot of Philcoin users, but I'm talking about people like my mother. I'm talking about people like my sister who I'm trying to get adopted into this industry, and it's just a fear of FTX, of Do Kwon, of these things.
I mean, that really goes into why, when I look at, without being too vocal, outside of the Bitcoin world, this is the problem, because we haven't solved money. Right? So Bitcoin in itself is what we're trying to fix here. So we're trying to fix a system that is debasing society, where it's corrupted.
So corrupt.
Right? And the world of money, lives and it dies. And we're at the kind of that end of the cycle. The world is up to its eyeballs in debt. So we're trying to solve this with Bitcoin and what that does. How does that reimagine the world of the internet, communication, money in that sense? But then the reason that your mum, your grand, your sister, everyone else is getting screwed over by this entire system is because of there's a ton of bad actors and cowboys sitting in this Web3, crypto, like ecosystem. And that's part of the issue. So when you see a lot of that angst online from Bitcoiners, it's because it's detracting from
the good that Bitcoin is
doing, the mission that it's at hand. Is it being executed perfectly? Is it flawless? Is there ways that it can be improved? Is there disagreements? Of course. There's going to be different perspectives. But in reality, that's what's trying to take place here. Over here, it's just a jungle. And there's some interesting experiments going on, but these centralized players, people like Sam, I'm not saying innocent or proven guilty, but it's pretty freaking obvious.
It's pretty obvious.
These guys abused and exploited, the everyday person.
Millions of views.
And, with that in mind, that's where the problem is. If we talk about Shiba Inu coin, Dogecoin, I mean, Yam coin, whatever the hell there was, that is 22,000 cryptos, and most of them are securities, if you went over the Howey test, unless you're going to reimagine that.
Absolutely. And there's people getting fined today by the SEC for selling unregulated securities.
The SEC, they're going after completely pointless, they completely miss FTX, but you'll go after Kim Kardashian.
Ridiculous.
What was the Russian exchange they went after the other day? No one's ever heard of it?
I know, I can't remember, but I was reading that too.
I can't even remember the name of it because it's that irrelevant. Right, but they miss Celsius. So it's
that's what Celsius. What I read the other day was 1/3 of Congress had taken money from Sam directly.
Very smart guy, Sam. He shifted money into all the pockets that was required.
We're talking about 33%. I can't say that in my Irish accent, but 1/3 of Congress had money in their pocket from Sam.
But then at the same time, how is that different from Congress? Without going political, being lobbied by the gun industry, the banking industry, the military industry, the pharmaceutical industry, if we just speak about a topic of a certain jab. It's like, if we go into all of these topics, that's how politics operates, right? So, the way the system operates today is money is used to lobby. It's used to not necessarily call favors, but to call influence. So Sam putting that money into politicians isn't necessarily the wrong thing to do, because it's kind of the way the system operates. However, what happens next and what happens now, given kind of how innocent people have been harmed, will be precedent for future. Right? So I think that's why this case will probably take some time to figure out, because at the same time, if you want to recoup all of that, where does the puck stop? How much money do you recoup?
Well, there's Kevin, what was it, how much money did he take in? But there's Kevin O'Leary, does he give back his 15 million, or what was it, 14 million, or 24 million?
I have no, I don't know what Kevin's relationship was with, I know he's a spokesman.
He was a paid puppet,
A paid spokesman who, in his mind, potentially was acting in good faith. Now,
give him the benefit of the doubt. Yeah.
if you were to give him the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah.
and this is the thing. Like, I mean, Twitter, FinTwit, you know, we can speculate all we want.
Yeah.
As a Bitcoin, like more of a Bitcoiner,
Yeah.
where I'd associate to, you know, you could see a lot of these issues
Yeah.
starting to kind of come up. If we think about yield,
Yeah.
you know, how much yield was being offered?
Yeah.
Anyone who understands finance, you're going to
Yeah.
say, well, yield is basically assuming some risk.
Yeah.
Because it's not free.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're seeing 20% yield on Yamcoin,
Ridiculous.
or whatever it is,
Yeah.
you know there's risk there, and that's
Yeah.
not necessarily too clear.
Yeah.
So we had that with some of the players, I think Celsius and BlockFi.
Yeah.
BlockFi, I think they were a bit unfortunate with how they kind of got caught up in it, but
Yeah.
at the same time, it's the same issues.
Yeah.
But we start on regulation. The point is, centralized entities,
Yes.
you know, they're the ones that got snuffed out by, you know, a non-manipulated kind of
Yeah.
industry to an extent,
Yeah.
specifically Bitcoin,
Yeah.
in that world. And, you know, as prices went down, as the tide went out,
Yeah.
we saw who was swimming naked. And leverage,
Very well said.
leverage is another
Yeah.
massive issue within this space.
Well, it was all leverage. When Sam and these
Well, we
boys see
still
how much
have
leverage,
leverage.
of course we have. There's so much leverage in the industry, in the market.
we were talking about, we haven't even touched on Barry and Genesis.
Yeah.
I mean, even Sager's got some leverage,
Yeah.
you know, in his position. So, again, I think it's Caitlin Long, she speaks a lot about this, around,
Yeah.
you know, got to be careful with a high vol asset class like this, you know, taking out too much leverage, then that's the risk that you take. So,
Yeah.
you know, in a world of new emerging technology,
Yeah.
in a world that we're seeing with crypto and the speed of adoption of where things are happening, you know, the hype cycles that come with
Yeah.
this space, I guess the knee-jerk reactions on monetary policy at a kind of a financial world, it's like all of these lines are converging.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these peaks and troughs that we see within the
Yeah.
industry are almost like they're representations
Yeah.
of this convergence of hype, speculation, mismanagement, policy error,
Yeah.
and it eventually just pops and then it comes back down. What's interesting is that, you know, the fundamentals are getting stronger and stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
I don't know if you follow them in 2022, but the fundamentals here
Yeah.
remain, particularly in certain aspects.
Yeah.
So, you know, strengthen fundamentals, and if you ever look back onto Amazon, like Jeff Bezos back
Yeah,
when
yeah.
the dot-com bubble happened, you know, he would look at his data sheet and he'd see everything, you know, his numbers were still kind of bottom left to top right.
Yeah.
Yet Amazon's share price was cratering like 90% of the time.
Mm.
And he's sitting there completely chill, just
Well,
keep on doing
yeah.
what you're doing. And I think when you look at some of the numbers within the space,
Yeah.
you mentioned about the adoption curve,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
right? You see that the speed of adoption has taken place there.
Mm.
If you look at things like that, you start to see the trends. So you can sit back and say, this is still an interesting.
We've
area.
seen this in tech, and we're here with now with
Are
Web3.
there headwinds? There's tons of headwinds.
Yeah.
Right. Just on a broader macro
Yeah.
aspect, macro will impact the crypto industry. It will impact every industry.
Of course. Yeah.
So there's a headwind there,
Yeah.
and we
But
don't.
I think specifically, to be fair, I mean, as I said, mentioned earlier, 2022 was a horrific year for crypto. Let's just group it together like that. But really, 2022 was worse.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about, let's not get political stuff, but we're talking about the Fed, inflation, industry hike, raising interest rates. We're talking about war in Europe. We're talking about political instability. We're talking about, I mean, what's going on with the presidency in America. Let's not talk about that. But I mean, it was an incredibly bad year. I'm surprised the actual, the Dow Jones, the Nasdaq, the FTSE, I mean, that they didn't take a bigger tumble.
I mean, you could argue that that's still to come, or that the Fed is navigating a soft landing.
I think the latter, yeah.
But I mean, it's very hard to determine. I think going into, I mean, I never said how I got into crypto.
Well, it's actually one of the questions I really want to ask you. Mixed with all of this, but why? Why was the main reason you got in? Yeah.
So I got into crypto. I got into Bitcoin. So I had a passion for politics, economics, and kind of psychology.
Yeah.
So, you know, at a young age, I went through college. I just took a keen interest in it, and I think at the time when I really got into politics, particularly US politics, was around Barack Obama's like rise, and really what happened in kind of 2015, 2016 was there was this kind of everything started to accelerate when it came to tech. I think this is the kind of Cambridge Analytica kind of Brexit.
Yeah.
That's when Brexit happened. This is when Trump got elected.
Yeah.
And there'd been the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And I was searching for this, trying to understand, make sense within kind of the world of politics, like society and economics. Trying to understand everything that was happening, and technology, sorry.
Yeah.
So there was this whole cycle of things, the speed that was happening here. I didn't know what was going on economically, financially. I knew a lot of it was driven by politics, and then how society operated. And that's really what, after the Cambridge Analytica thing with Brexit, that was really where Bitcoin then came onto my radar.
Yeah.
Really kind of breaking into the tech scene as well.
When you say, I'm sorry to interrupt because I love hearing you talk about this, but when you say this is how you got in, but tell me how you got in. So was it through a friend or was it through your own research?
It came up on my feed.
Beautiful. So it's research.
It was research. So it came up on my feed once, and I can't remember the article, but I was reading it, and it was talking about how Bitcoin was this representational crossover of this kind of like amalgamation of where society was heading.
Yeah.
And the end of a cycle. The fourth turning. It was something to do with like the fourth turning.
Yeah.
And as I went deeper, I was like, okay, hold on, this speaks to technology, and I'm working in startups in the tech space. Economics, I'm like, okay, well, if we're all working and given our time, then we need to understand what money is. So I need to understand how the economic system operates. Politics, I was blown away by what had happened with Brexit. And Trump was running.
Who saw that?
So,
Who saw that though?
You know, so there was a lot of confusion, and I think just general confusion. And then kind of society and all, I think what I really noticed with society was just how quickly, especially with Brexit, you know, society fragmented.
Yeah.
It was like, and it divided friendship groups. There was
identity politics. Then.
It was insane.
Like crazy. Yeah.
And what had happened with technology had this accelerated this rift.
Yeah.
And society really fragmented into these two groups.
Polarized.
So, and that's when I discovered Bitcoin. So when I started reading up on Bitcoin, I was super interested.
I wish when you were telling me about Bitcoin back in 2019.
Probably, yeah.
2018, 2019. When you first started telling me when we were standing up in Careem on the 21st floor and you were going on, I was like,
that was that was around Bitcoin's first dip into kind of.
You were big in it then, and you were telling me about it, and I was like, no, bro.
And it was this weird. I mean, Bitcoin gets to everyone in many different ways.
Absolutely.
And don't get me wrong, during that period of time when I first came into it, like 2017, that happened. So I saw the run up. I then got caught up in the ICO boom.
Yeah.
A lot of naivety there to understand
Huge,
kind of what was going on.
Yeah.
So I actually speculated
Yeah.
into those and paid the price for that.
Yeah.
But what happened after that, and what I hope has happened for a lot of people during 2022, is that in 2018 and 2019, I stayed within the space and just spent my time learning from other Bitcoiners and other people within the industry, even if it was listening to people like Vitalik, because Ethereum had come through that scene at that time, to really understand what was actually trying to take place and what was happening. And it was really then where I was then totally converted into, okay, there's a purpose here.
Yeah.
And this thing, decentralized network, represents a lot of what society can become in the future. So we know that there's going to be a break. We know that things are going to fragment, and then over time, you know, things will heal.
Yeah.
And I love history, so I read a lot of history.
Yeah.
You know, when I speak about it, you read about it in these chunks of time. You talk about 100-year periods.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird in today's world because we operate in a world now.
Yeah.
So society struggles with the premise of, okay, well, what am I going to hand to my children and my grandchildren?
Yeah.
Yet the way that I kind of see these things, I look at these over cycles and I think, okay, well, there's what do I need today, and then what will we need tomorrow, and then what we need like 2 generations.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite fascinating. When you look at something like Bitcoin, you think this is the start of what potentially will be something over 100 to 300 year period.
Oh, absolutely.
And that for me is quite exciting.
So you would say, when we look at what we mentioned a little bit earlier, is the adoption curve. You know the way it's like this and then.
Yeah. Well, we've got a price curve.
Yeah.
The price curve. I mean, typically in tech you see like a lot of S curves.
Yeah.
All right. Most drops off.
Yeah.
We're actually nearing, I would argue, the middle point of the S.
Would you?
Yeah, Yeah, the way that I imagine, because even though like we live in this space, right? So when you think of what Bitcoin and crypto is, we live and breathe that.
Yeah. We don't
So for me, I'm like, everyone must know what it is, but that's
what I believe too.
But people don't. People have heard of it, but they're fearful of it.
Yeah.
And people are always fearful of change.
Yeah.
And also, this is where I have the issue with the Web3 kind of clouding confusion with the two. So, yeah, I think in terms of a technology cycle or a tech cycle, we're nearing the end of that first wave.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that price falls off a cliff, nor does it mean that price just suddenly shoots to $1 million, $2 million. But it does mean that I think we're at a point of inflection where there's enough traction and there's enough interest and technologies, as everything converges, that this whole decade can accelerate quite quickly.
So you think we're on the cusp of a bull run?
Not saying that. I would like to think that would be.
I would love to think this.
But no, I think the next bull run will be, if there is a speculative bull run, it will be driven by monetary policy again.
Okay.
Perhaps break at it'll be another break at a traditional level.
Yeah.
I think the real bull run that anyone in this space should be advocating for, and anyone building in this space, should be driven by fundamentals of user adoption, use cases, real world application.
Yeah.
So if this space is to succeed, if you want to see 100x, that is going to be driven by fundamentals.
Yeah.
There potentially is another speculative run that could happen, or a protection against debasement.
Yeah.
And that really depends on what scenario you see playing out when it comes to central bank policy.
Yeah.
Because I think the whole narrative of Bitcoin being an inflation hedge was kind of disproven.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a good inflation warning, suggesting that it was coming, but I think as the dust has settled, I think it's become more clear that Bitcoin can be seen as a debasement hedge.
Okay, yeah.
Or a debasement warning.
Yeah.
Wouldn't call it a hedge yet.
Yeah.
Because the volatility is still there.
Yeah.
But it's a warning indicator of when money's being debased. Now, the biggest debaser being the Fed, when they have to print, and if they're going to raise their debt ceiling, and they have to print, then you're likely going to see Bitcoin take some of that liquidity.
Yeah.
But while they're pulling liquidity out of the system, then you're seeing that kind of retracing price, and obviously at the sharp end, all the other crap. Coins get feel the pinch on that even more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's this, that's kind of the main driver of what could happen.
Okay.
If we start seeing some really strong use cases and adoption, even when I think about things like, NFTs to an extent are a bit speculative at the moment because it's kind of still trading cards almost.
Exactly,
but there's something there in the underlying technology aspect. Like when we think about what these are, if this gets cracked, all the issues that we had in this last cycle, if you start solving them, there's a big prize at the end.
And you feel like a lot of that has been ironed out already, and we're moving into the next?
No.
See, for me, NFTs, and again, I'm in the space now, not as long as you are. I wish I listened to you sooner.
I'm not big on NFTs.
No, you're not. But what I mean is, I wish I got into the space, the broader space sooner. But for me and the people I speak to, the people who are fearing it, like my mother, my sister, my gran, those people, to them, NFTs are scarier than crypto.
Sure. But because
because what I'm saying is to them, they're like, what, a non-fungible token, it's a JPEG, it's a computer image, you're trading baseball cards per se.
Yeah.
But like with crypto, there is, even though I don't know, can we say this without getting blocked, but we are trading securities, unregulated securities, unverified securities. That's what a lot of it are. If you do, these tests, it's what they are, a lot of them. And again, I'm not talking about Bitcoin, it's not. But to me, NFTs, trying to sell the world with NFTs is a lot harder than it is to try and sell crypto.
Yeah.
Tokens, sorry.
Well, it really depends on, and again, I don't like, crypto itself has got a bad name to an extent.
Yeah.
It's actually, if you think about what the technology is, cryptographic technology.
Absolutely.
Right. So again, humans, we call it this industry, crypto industry. Now the crypto industry as a whole has a stigma to it, right? That creates fear. So humans inherently fear change regardless.
Yeah.
So, there's still people today who don't use internet banking because they're convinced they're going to lose their money.
Just they live too far in the past.
And if you think of the adoption curve, right, they are laggard.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be those people that exist.
Yeah.
So you've kind of got this aspect, people will fear change no matter what. And then you've got stigma.
Yeah.
Now, stigma is driven, you could argue it's driven by a couple of things.
Yeah.
It's driven by propaganda.
Yeah.
So incumbents,
Yeah.
as to how they detract against an industry.
Yeah.
You could argue back in the day things like Kodak,
Yeah.
Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Now look at what we have. We have iPhone,
Yeah.
and we have Netflix.
Completely
Right?
flipped, yeah.
But at the time, that if you were to go back through the archive, you would see a lot of negative sentiment towards this online streaming. Even if you think of, I don't know if you've seen the TV series, it's the Spotify series, when they were...
I have, it's fantastic.
Yeah, right, so like you're talking about Napster and all of this,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
the
yeah.
incumbents will fight.
Yeah.
So then they fight you.
Yeah.
Now, the crypto industry has been in that cycle for a long time.
Yeah.
Who are the incumbents?
Yeah.
Some big fucking players.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse the language, but you've got the banking industry,
Yeah.
you've got the government.
Yeah.
Now, does this industry in large complement those two? Yes and no. Now, at a governance level, it removes a lot of the crap.
Yes.
Right, and solves some of those issues.
Yeah.
When it comes to issuance and the financial aspect, control and policy, like what
Yeah.
potentially money and DeFi can do, that's going to really disrupt an industry that has ring-fenced itself.
Which hasn't changed for the last 110 years.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So, I look at this as an investor,
Yeah.
particularly within, some of these areas, and think, well, we saw what happened with the internet. We've
Yeah.
seen what happens with Blockbuster and Netflix.
Yeah.
We've seen what happens when it comes to photography.
Yeah.
So
Kodak, was it $100 a share and then 5 years later it's $3?
Exactly. So I'm confident that this industry will disrupt. How it disrupts and what happens next, I think there's multiple paths that can go down. I think there's still a huge kind of journey there. So, but I think the industry has to work on adoption, like use case, like ease. It has to break down these barriers. That's going to help with stigma and change, and it's got to be practical.
Yeah.
It's easy today to pay with Apple Wallet. It's very easy.
Simple. But 10 years ago, if you said that to me, remember the first time I had an Apple Watch and I went bang.
Exactly.
I honestly thought I was living in a space odyssey.
Yeah.
I thought I was living in like intergalactic. I was like, how the hell? But now to me, it doesn't even. I don't even carry my card anymore.
Precisely. So we're disrupting something like from a user experience point of view. It's very, very seamless.
Uh-huh.
And again, this is where it's interesting where the different areas of this industry, sit. So one thing we haven't solved for, saving money. Like, how do you store your wealth?
Yeah.
So if you think about the last 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is, 0% interest, your money in the bank. In some parts of the world, that money gets seized.
Yeah.
So when it comes to storing your wealth, there's that aspect. But then there's the rails that come on top of that.
Yeah.
Which again, I'm not going to go back through it, but that's when we talk about what Bitcoin potentially represents. You've got the underlying, the bearer asset.
Yeah.
So I'm the bearer, I can hold my asset. And that's so powerful.
Yeah.
I am the custodian of my asset.
Absolutely.
Of my wealth.
Yeah.
No one else, no third party, no
Yeah.
counterparty. Right, that's if you understand it, or if you leave it on an exchange, that's where the risk comes.
And I'm assuming you're just very, very quickly. You're a cold storage guy. Oh, 100%. I shouldn't have asked. But
in fairness, again, even that is a process.
Yeah.
If I think back to 2016, 17, I didn't know what I was doing, how to do that.
Of course.
So it does take time, and there's that. How do we make that more seamless? So I think there's some people in the industry that I think are trying to work towards that and trying to solve that more. And I think that it's going to come with time. So I'm pretty confident that this becomes much more seamless. But
hopefully,
I don't think you're sensible keeping your coins on exchanges.
No. I didn't. I was asking just because it's a hot topic after.
Unless you're trading. If you're a trader and you're frequently moving money, then yes, I think that's you want to, but you're taking a risk.
Absolutely, and I think. We were just talking just before we started this podcast. I was saying I've got a couple of $100 in this project, a couple of hundred here, and obviously a couple of hundred in Philcoin, why we're all here today. But no, I digress. But those coins I keep hot on MEXC, on Bitmark, etc., etc. But the majority, no. I think I saw enough people get their fingers burned last year that I started to do my own research into Trezor and these cold storage wallets, and I've now moved into that for the stuff that I'm holding on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everyone in the space, or if you're not in the space, and I think, like I say, one of the most powerful things about Bitcoin is being that you are it's a bearer asset, right?
Absolutely.
So you control your money.
Yeah.
You know, there's no counterparty
Yeah.
there, unless you put the counterparty there.
Yeah.
So you should understand what counterparty risk means.
Well, then you just own an IOU, basically.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Right. And you know that comes with risk. If you hold other coins, you know, whatever your purpose for holding those is, you know, that's entirely up to you.
No, absolutely.
So yeah, but I think overall the industry is starting to move towards
more
adoption. Some of the things
yeah.
that it should be trying to solve for.
Well, and that brings me on to one of the things I wanted to speak about as well. There's specific areas around the world that are more friendly, more geared towards faster adoption, wanting to accelerate the speed of how we use cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, etc. Obviously, El Salvador is a huge one for us because you know, we're looking at them making, you know, policy changes at the core government level. So they adopted it as a currency, and then they're making bonds with Bitcoin, which is
what kind of bonds?
Yeah, no, we won't get into that yet because that's only a couple of weeks old since they've really.
Well, they're refiring it back up. Like it was a conversation that put on the back burner. Yeah.
So I'm scared to talk about it. I'll be honest, I don't know enough about it. But then we've got other countries like Brazil who are talking about, you know, moving away from the dollar. They want to get onto, you know, they want to divest into blockchain cryptocurrencies. And then we've got countries like the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, one of the Emirates that we live in. These are extremely friendly places, Singapore as well, for the crypto community. Hence, we both live here.
Yeah.
But why do you think Dubai has become such a hub for, and let's not get too political because I can see you smiling, but why do you think places like Dubai, Singapore have become so friendly to crypto people? So
I think I'd speak to Dubai, UAE overall as a whole, from a vision point of view. So one of the things that's kept me here is understanding what the country's vision and purpose is. So it is very clear from a leadership perspective where the country, you know, is trying to move towards. So, you know, when you get a 2030, 2040, 2050, whatever it is, vision outlined, as an entrepreneur, as an employee, as a citizen, the ability for you to then align yourself to work towards supporting part of those objectives, while also supporting your own personal objectives, is very powerful. And I would argue that's one of the biggest flaws in Western democracy. The transitory nature of government and leadership creates instability within society. So if we take the UK, for example, or the US,
bipartisan politics,
4 to 5 year period,
4 to 8 years, boom, boom.
You know, it's about getting into power. It's about trying to get a few wins under your belt, as we saw with Biden pre-midterm. And then it's about retaining power. And it's mudslinging. Right. So that creates problems. Versus here, where, you know, call it whatever you want. You know, a monarchy, more authoritarian, whatever it is. At the same time, you have a vision, you have a plan. So it's outlined as to where the place wants to go. And you can see that with the growth and development. So that's to advocate for what I think is a system that is an improvement upon some of the democratic or values, principles that I value in society. So that's what keeps me here. In terms of the industry, crypto industry and kind of more broader, you know, I think there's two parts to that. And I think we should speak truthfully to it. There is the fact that there is still it's a bit unclear, the regulatory framework, what it is, it's a bit loose. So that incentivizes, you know, people to come here because it's a bit more open. Now that might be a great approach because it's saying, okay, we'll learn as we go, and you know, again, going back to my previous point, regulations come slower than they do fast, rather than iron fist. Versus some of the markets where it's just an iron fist. I mean, if we look at the bureaucracy in the EU, then the headaches of kind of like the SEC and stuff in the US, you know, this deters people from setting up there. Even though those two are very great places, certainly the US is an amazing place to start a company.
Oh yeah, amazing.
But at the same time, that kind of iron fist aspect creates a bit of a challenge. So I think there's a looser kind of thing which incentivizes people to come here. With that brings good actors and bad actors. Right? So I've seen recently the 3AC guys, not to shit on them, But they are, they're looking at raising a new fund.
Yeah.
They're based here.
They are.
It's questionable really how these guys, should they be held to account?
Well,
what is that process? How much due diligence is going to be done? That takes me on to the second point. Overall in this whole space, there's been a lack of due diligence.
Yeah.
So that's partly why we've seen a lot of the issues.
Massively. No one, but also without this, I completely agree with you. 90% the lack of due diligence, because people can do what they want, and the industry is so fast, and people aren't asking the right questions, which is due diligence.
It comes to investors as well, right?
Of course, it's the investors' problem. Sequoia Capital.
Precisely.
They're supposed to be one of the oak trees, the pillars of VCs, and 550 million or whatever it was into thing, and sorry FTX, Sequoia.
Exactly. So again, it's almost like these are the issues that are there. So as individuals, even as just normal retail folk, we have to do our own due diligence. You can't just rely on big household names, because they will. It's not that they deliberately screwed up; they just made a mistake.
Absolutely. Right? So I'm not holding their feet to the fire, but I'm saying no one is.
Exactly. So here, going back to your original point of why Dubai is quite friendly. I mean, that lack of regulation, a little bit more loose in terms of frameworks and way of operating, has attracted some of that here.
Yes.
But I think I would optimistically say more of it is coming here because it shares more of a vision.
Yeah.
With a more open kind of society, which is more based around technology, innovation, forward-looking, forward-thinking, and I think
smartest government in the world.
So I think a lot of good actors will come into regions like this.
Yeah.
Even though we are going to let through the cracks, there's going to be some bad players that come in.
Absolutely.
But a lot of good is going to come in because of that alignment with kind of a leadership piece. And that's very powerful when you talk about it on a broader kind of macro landscape.
Absolutely,
right? The reason Europe, you don't think of household names in Europe when it comes to technology, is because they wrap themselves in bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Right? They don't allow innovation to flourish.
That's the worst.
Deter it.
Yeah.
In the US, they had the Silicon Valley boom and everything, but there's so much divide and infighting on different topics.
Well, big tech is the elitist, the left, and the Rust Belt, the middle class, the lower middle class is the GOP.
Exactly.
And you can watch this in any program today, I don't know if you watch Succession or these, but it is literally that, the left versus the right. Yeah. And that doesn't exist here.
No, and rightly or wrongly, is that good or bad? Is there balance? I mean, you can all have points of view on that, but it's definitely too extreme on one side over the US alone. And as a Westerner, I'd love to see that kind of pull back and rationale and what allowed it to flourish. Yeah. What we benefited from growing up to actually re-establish itself. Yeah. Because it's very clear there's a power shift, and you spoke about things like Brazil. Yeah. And kind of moving away from the dollar system. I mean, I understand that. The dollar system has to an extent now kind of reached a point.
I think it has.
Which, it's not going away. Yeah. But there is change coming.
People aren't as keen to get into bed with the dollar as they were.
But it's two parts, right? There's weaponization of a financial system, which is problematic, and then there's just if you're not the controller of that financial system, you're beholden to it.
Absolutely, right? Well said. So countries as big as Brazil, with as much potential as Brazil, and I'm not just talking about Brazil, I'm talking about the BRIC, India, Brazil. I'm talking about.
It's a very powerful bloc.
Such a powerful bloc, and I can completely understand what they're saying. Hold on a second. Yeah. We're beholden to someone who we make zero. They have no board seats at the board of directors. Exactly. So of course, why would they not want to look away and divest into blockchain, into other areas where they can actually make decisions?
Yeah, and that also comes back into trust. We won't go into the whole, maybe that's another podcast, but that whole space is it's going to impact this space enormously. Yeah. Because the fragmentation of a one system, dollar system, is very clearly upon us. Yeah. And we don't know today what that is. Yeah. Gold will play a role, other commodities,
massive,
real world assets. Yeah. would all play a role. China would obviously play a role.
Huge.
Within that. So, all of these things, and that just comes on to, I don't know if it's any more of your questions, but some of the stuff that I look at for, when I'm more confident in the market, going into the end of 2022 is actually when I deployed most of my cash.
Really?
In November, December time.
You deployed most of your cash.
Cash from the crash. Because certain indicators outside of crypto were lining up. Right now, I personally, I'm not calling a bomb. I don't know. I'm not speculating in that sense.
Can I ask you too? Mm-hmm. Do you think we have seen it? Because we've seen BTC, we've seen Bitcoin break 20, break 21 recently. I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time I looked, we were at 21.3 or something like that.
Something like that.
Yes, we were around there. I mean, I hope we have reached the bottom with Bitcoin because, oh my God, in December I was listening to the analysts and we were at 15, 16, and they were like, no, it's more likely we'll hit 10 before we see 18. And I was like, please God, no.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
If I'm completely honest, but the rational side of me looked at certain indicators. So, I use glass mode. I look on chain a lot, and I see a lot of the data was suggesting that Bitcoin specifically was in a high value region.
Yeah.
Right. So, indicators are not a guarantee; they're just like a guide.
Yeah.
Right. So probabilities, and then outside of the crypto industry is really where I take more of my lead from. So I don't look at the Bitcoin dollar chart as much. I look at the Bitcoin oil chart.
Okay.
Right. And that's interesting because it's a real valuable commodity that the world runs on.
Absolutely.
It doesn't run on dollars.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
And that double bottomed in November.
Mm.
I look at the Dixie, very important.
Yeah.
And then I also track central banks all together in one sheet.
Okay.
And then I see their balance sheet to an extent, which is an interesting indicator. Again, we were talking about debasement. So what was interesting about that was in October, that seemed to find some form of, whether it's a bottom or a local bottom, and that's been moving up. And Bitcoin tends to lag that by about 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
So in December, it was very clear that there was indicators, there were all 3 indicators outside of crypto, along with all of the on-chain stuff, that were lining up to say, this may be an area of interest.
Okay.
And that's kind of an area that I've, as a long-term investor, save that in Bitcoin. Speculate that on other crap as it appears. That's kind of where my focus is. So.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because look, again, you're a friend of mine. I don't need to blow smoke up your proverbial, but you are a very smart guy. You're a very analytical guy. I've never seen you make a rash decision without doing your due diligence or your research. But just you could that comes across just the way you speak about things. You're a smart guy. Bitcoin, again, I know when it comes to you, let's leave that Bitcoin here and crypto here. But if we just look at the world of cryptocurrencies together, a term that myself and my CMO Tatum April, who you've met, she likes to say, and I like to say as well, is cryptocurrency is like Marmite. We love it or we hate it, Forget the people who love it. I love it, you love Bitcoin, that's it. But for the people who hate it, and again, I reverberate back to my mother and my sister and everything, smart guy like you, 3 things, what would you say to the people who hate it, or the people that we're trying to get to adopt?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the first question I ask people when they say to me about getting into Bitcoin or Dogecoin was the one that came up a lot in 2022 or 2021. The question that I normally ask people is, okay, what is money?
Okay.
Do you understand what money is? And you would be amazed at how many people you speak to
won't be able to answer.
Smart people won't be able to tell you what money is.
Yeah.
Now, that's a great starting point, because then I typically would share information around, okay, now try to understand what money is and the history of money.
Yeah.
Obviously, money being a medium of exchange, a store of value, a way, like you have a good or a service and I want that, so I give this in return which you value. So I try to help people understand what money is. Once they do that, and then really it's about, okay, then from there you need to understand really what Bitcoin's original purpose was for.
Yeah.
So from there you want to understand what it's trying to solve.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of it?
Yeah.
How does it work? like how does the system operate?
Yeah.
From mining to validators, right? Wallets, like what are these things? Try to understand the basics of Bitcoin specifically, and how it's framed today.
Yeah.
And then it's really about everything else. So I would always try, whenever I try to help naysayers or people who don't like stuff, I always ask them things like, okay, when did you first use Google? Or when did you sign up to Facebook?
Early adopter, late adopter,
And how often do you, or when did you start using email? When did you move away from a fax machine to email? Your mum's a great one. Because Facebook, WhatsApp, they live by that now.
Oh, absolutely.
Previously, so they come on.
My mum calls me on WhatsApp. She doesn't use her cellular network anymore.
No, exactly. So when you start talking about things that they already understand, and they've already adopted, and then find synergies with, right? So that's kind of the process that I would take. So internet banking is a great one. If you talk about, okay, so when did you start using internet banking? It's really good, like how easy it is to transact, go on, see all your statements, stuff. Just imagine that on your phone, you can just see everything that you own. So when you talk about NFTs or you talk about your balance of other coins, like we can see all that in one area. Imagine, in the future, you'll be able to see your mortgage on there. All of your other contracts that you have, and then you can just go across to another wallet and it's got all of your contracts with your business. Right, so you just try to frame, and like this is what the technology is trying to achieve. Overall, or the vision of what it could be. Is it there today? No, of course not. But this is like early stages. So that's how I typically frame with naysayers.
This is why I asked you, you're a super smart guy. I don't
know if it's right.
No, absolutely. I wouldn't say it's a manipulative way, but it's an incredibly intelligent way to get someone utilizing their own knowledge that they haven't synced up yet with what we're trying to get them to do, and explain to them in a way that they kind of have an aha moment.
Precisely. And it's the same when it comes to transacting money. So I've got family in Egypt. Right. So trying to send money to Egypt or from Egypt.
Very hard.
It's a 5-6 day process. Right. So if you've ever sent money abroad, you've ever gone on a holiday and you have to wire some money, or even
Ireland, the first world country with the SWIFT. I mean, one of the first people to sign up to SWIFT. 3 to 5 business days. What a joke!
And with the fees.
Yeah.
And everything on top. So you've got your Western Union. So if you've ever had to go through that process, when you explain this to people, I'm like, okay. So again, going back to the analogy, remember back in the day when it used to cost you 10 pence to send an SMS. Now we have WhatsApp. I'm like, so mum, remember back in the day when you used to have to wire money to family in Egypt and it takes 5 days? Well, imagine you can do that in a 10-minute block. Right, that's really what we're moving kind of towards. Now, that's the potential that encompasses there. So that helps start to frame stuff. The problem, the biggest challenge for the industry, 2 challenges, is the UI UX, the experience with it. It's still quite
clunky. It's clunky. You kind of really would want to know what you're doing, or have used other.
I mean, how many times if you've ever typed in wallets, and I know that DNS, unstoppable domains and all of this stuff, they try to solve this now with just names and everything to stop the whole line of code of transferring wallets. Back in the day when you used to send Bitcoin over like a wallet, checking that.
You need a degree.
Check that every 5 seconds, and panicking for 10 minutes while it confirmed. We don't have that so much now with Lightning. It's much easier with the Lightning invoice, but
it's simple.
So it is getting better.
But again, for people like my mother, it's still
perfect. Exactly. And then there's the whole aspect of we spoke about this change. So most of these people, if you live in Bitcoin's world or crypto world, your news sources are you're coming from independent, Substack, Medium, you live on Twitter, right? You're engaging with people within the space. You've seen a different side to the world. A lot of people who are not the adopters at this stage, a lot of their news sources still come from your CNNs, your Sky News, your BBC. Your Guardian paper, the FT, and they still have potentially an angle or an agenda which isn't necessarily pro full adoption of this yet. So you're fighting against that narrative there too. So if you're willing, again with any technology, if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to do the proof of work, to go in and actually learn and educate yourself, and spend the time and invest your time to understand anything, then you'll probably invest in something.
I agree, but more so for early adopters, you, myself, other people, the Phil Nation, etc. But I really do, like a majority of my friends who aren't in it, and I speak about them specifically, they're never going to be the people, and I still love them, but they're never going to be the people who get up there, ask like you and I, who will go and learn something to help themselves. They will wait till an app comes along that they can go, boop, boop.
And that's why we have the S-curve.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Right. So there is the initial upside.
Yeah.
And then there is okay, now we're at a critical point.
Yeah.
And I do really think that by the end of this decade, there's going to be two scenarios that obviously play out, or two things that will need to play out, or hopefully only one of them. I think both are going to play out, but will lead to mass adoption. Yeah. One of them is massive monetary debasement. I think the debt system. I don't see a way off this debt spiral. So and I'm not fully. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in that field, but it doesn't look great. So you've got that aspect.
Well, what America was $1 trillion, which is half held by China, and I know we're screwed.
The debt aspect. So money's going to have to be.
That's what you meant. Sorry.
Yeah, we're going to have to we're going to have to inflate the debt away. So there's going to be debasement there. That's going to lead money into risk assets, and then the aspect of use case, real world adoption.
Yeah.
Like the industry can't get away with monkey JPEGs anymore.
Yeah.
Right. There's got to be value that's added.
100% utility use cases are utility-based products.
And I think that's where the
like Philcoin.
Exactly.
So look, I wanna just, because I'm conscious of your time, I know we're heading to different things this evening, but I wanted to ask you one more question before I went away. And I like to, who the hell am I just saying now? I should use the word hell. Who am I thinking that I can ask you, a funny question by saying what I usually like to end with? But for the first time, my first podcast, what I'd like to end with is just a fun question. 5 people, or me and you are going out for dinner tonight, we have 4 empty seats. Who, dead or alive, fictional, would you invite to our fake dinner party this evening? Preferably with a crypto tech kind of slam. But if it's not, if it's like Sherlock Holmes, go for it.
Okay. I'd have Jack Mauler.
Okay.
Jack Maulers. Do you know Jack Maulers?
No, but I mean,
founder of Stripe.
Yeah.
Bitcoin product. I'd have him, young kid, super smart.
How young are we talking? One of these 23-year-old geniuses.
Yeah,
oh my god, yeah.
So I'd have him super passionate about Bitcoin.
So it's Strike. It's like it's built on the Lightning Network.
Yeah, it's a true disruptor of like Western Union. So the ability to send, say you're here and you want to send US dollars to someone in Europe.
Yeah.
Basically, US dollars in, converts over Bitcoin into the Lightning, and then out in euros.
Like that.
Instant, yeah. So fiat to fiat.
I've read this with these. They were trying this with these 5 kids in Uganda in Kampala, and the guy sent it from somewhere in America, and it was instant. They could put it out of their car.
Bitcoin Beach really. I mean, it's a large part. Like if you think about all of this aspect, like Jack went down there. He's worked with Kelly. Yeah. So Jack Mauler's I'll have.
Okay, Jack Mauler.
So everyone.
Have to invite him to our next podcast.
Yeah, there we go. Who else would I have? I would have. I would have Vitalik.
Great answer.
Yeah. Just.
Do you think he'd say much?
I think he'd say a lot, and he's an interesting character. I mean, I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but at the same time, I'd love to learn and listen and absorb from him.
Absolutely.
So I'd have him in the room. Who else would I have? I want to say like Michael Saylor, but you might not get a word in edgeways.
Yeah, but he's what they've done with MicroStrategy and all this, genius. And he's a true advocate of Bitcoin.
I'd have Jake Powell in it.
Okay.
For sure, we'd have Jake Powell.
Yeah.
Just want to understand what's going on when you turn the back on.
I think your dinner party would be very intellectual.
Yeah. And so we need another character, another party character.
You would. You want a disruptor.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you have one of the NFT, one of the GM bros? Would you have?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm trying to think. What about Jack Dorsey, another Bitcoin advocate?
Yeah.
He's turned into more of a hippie, but he's cool.
Yeah. You wouldn't want it too lopsided with Bitcoin as you'd want it. I'd want the debate.
Well said, yeah. But you got Vitalik.
Yeah. You bring Sam.
You think you get a day pass from prison?
No.
And plus, we'd have to have vegan food. You're not a vegetarian. No, you're not a vegetarian. Sorry.
I'm a big steak.
You're a big sorry. But I'm trying to think. I've got another friend who's. Oh no, apologies. But yeah, what was the thing about Sam when they were going to jail? His parents were ringing up every day going, please make sure he has vegan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we'd have him.
Yeah. So I mean, there's tons of other people.
So many, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to have a Bitcoin only thing, it would be Preston Fish, Jeff Booth,
Yeah.
Michael Saylor, Jack Waters.
Michael Saylor really is, like, there's times throughout the year I was like, oh, he's taking a dive, and what's he going to do? Next day I read in the paper, he buys another 550, whatever, like a million Bitcoin. It's like...
It's conviction.
Just pure conviction.
Yeah.
He just truly believes.
Yeah.
But he will be laughing.
I believe he will.
He will be laughing uncontrollably.
Yeah.
When it goes to where. I mean, we all speculate where it's going differently. Some people, even some big analysts from major banks, are saying like, it's going to hit 1 million here, it's going to hit 1 million there. But I mean, even if it goes to 250,000 from where he's bought the majority of his coins.
I mean, I always find this interesting. I try to steer away on price, but one of the things on price is, does it account for inflation? These predictions of like 1 million a coin, it's great, providing that we haven't experienced some form of hyperinflation.
True, but like, I mean, is it not something that exists within the market to stay away from stuff that you could invest in that would be affected by hyperinflation?
I think it's a future state that we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yes, listen, Steve, my friend, ex-colleague, outspoken tweeter, everything that you are, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. I'll always remember this moment as it was my first podcast that I hosted. But thank you so much.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye, Phil Nation.